Crypt Keeper's face. So my name is John Kassir, and I am being hosted by
Jeff Pawlak.
Thanks.
Straight out of Cheektowaga. Right here in Buffalo, New York.
Excellent, excellent.
Welcome to Buffalo, John.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad you're all here. Thank you.
Is this your first time visiting?
It's not my first time to Buffalo. It's my first time to Nickel City Con. I think maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was in Niagara Falls, and my wife and I went, and we had a great time up there. And then I came back through Buffalo, and I'm a kind of an architecture buff, so I really enjoyed looking through the city. You know, checking out all the architecture. There's even some Frank Lloyd Wright stuff here, but it's funny, some of these older cities, you know, you come through them and you're like, what were they thinking when they put a road here? But they were probably built long before they had cars, a lot of the buildings and stuff. So, you know, it's like the roads don't always make sense. You should try, if you've ever tried to navigate Washington, D.C., forget about it. But I grew up in Baltimore. In a rural part of Baltimore, and in fact the Preakness is probably on right now, isn't it? I should be watching that. I never really used to watch it anyway. We'd always be drunk on the infield, so never really got to see the race. But my mom grew up in Springfield, Mass, in a historical Victorian, so that was kind of like, and I used to take, you know, when I think about it, I used to scare my cousins, my little cousins. I'd take them through this old house, and I'd write, like we'd go up into the attic, my cousins and I would write, you know, stuff in the mirrors, you know, in the dusty mirrors, or like beware and stuff like that, and I'd take them on a little tour through the house. This is, my mother's maiden name was Cassilius, and I was like, this is the house of old man Cassilius, you know, and I would take them through, and it was kind of like my first crack at doing the Crypt, you know, a Crypt Keeper like character back in that day.
I was just about to say, if that's not a precursor to your career, I don't know what is.
I know, right? But you know, that's why one of the reasons I have such an appreciation for old architecture. So yeah.
You're also in a good city to be wearing a hockey jersey.
That's it.
On top of that,
I love hockey. This jersey was actually given to me by an amateur hockey team that called themselves the Crypt Keepers. They probably spelled it with K's so that it, you know, they couldn't get any copyright infringements. Of course, they go, you know, the C was for the keeper. The keeper, and they said, so what number do you want? I go, what do you think? Of course, I'm gonna have to.
oh, that's perfect.
And I've had a lot of people try to steal this off my back too. But I'm gonna have to get something similar made up. I'm not gonna steal their design, but I'll have something similar made up to offer for fans to get. It's such a great thing to have. I wear it to every convention because I just so enjoy, you know, wearing it. It's like, oh, there's the Crypt Keeper in his hockey jersey. You know, it's like, it's so cool.
Is there an NHL team that you follow, you know, closely?
Well, I do live in LA, so the Kings.
Cool.
They did have you know, when I was a kid, we had a AAA team in Baltimore called the Clippers, and they had a fight song. It was like, go you Baltimore Clippers, go you Clippers for Baltimore, go you Baltimore Clippers, and score, 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 win you Baltimore. Anyway, so every time I like do any team in LA, I'm like, go you LA Kings. There we go. What's that song from? I don't tell them it's like the old Clipper song. And you get like a whole group of people singing at the hockey games. But getting on to Tales from the Crypt, you know, a lot of people don't know how I wound up getting the part. You know, it's kind of a long story of my acting career is now into its 38th year of supporting myself as an actor. I've always loved acting since I was a kid, and I got involved in doing circuses in my basement, and you know, entertaining the other kids in the neighborhood, and getting involved in plays in high school and even in elementary school. And then I went full on to it in college, studying theater, and I moved to New York as a theater actor, and got I'm going to stand up just because I like standing while I'm talking, because I used to do stand up. Sit down. You know, I used to do you know, theater in New York, and it's really hard to make a living doing that. So I started street performing in front of the Metropolitan Museum. I would dress up in whiteface so people knew I was doing an act there, and I would climb the building across the street and hang a big banner on the building, now appearing John Kassir, and people could see me for two blocks on either side. And the next thing I know, they'd all sit on the steps of the museum, and I'd be performing down on the sidewalk, and all kinds of people would be coming by, and buses would have to stop at the light, and I'd go out, I'd pretend to mime, lasso the bus, and I'd start walking like this when the light would change, and the bus could only go as fast as me, so it looked like I was pulling a bus down Fifth Avenue, and people would be like, "Oh my God, look at that guy pulling a bus down Fifth Avenue." And so that's how I was supporting myself, and from that it kind of, as I was auditioning for theater, I got a part in an off-Broadway show called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down. And I know that sounds like really rude, but it was about stand-up comics, because that's kind of what a stand-up comic feels like when they're in front of the audience and they're not getting laughs. They kind of feel naked from the waist down. So, anyway, I got in that show. I got part of the show, and it was me and Scott Bakula, who you know from Quantum Leap and CIS New Orleans, and he played the MC kind of guy. I played kind of the really screwed up Andy Kaufman kind of guy, and then the guy who wrote the piece, Jerry Polker, played kind of the angry kind of lawyer turned comedian kind of guy. And we become a big hit in the second act of the show. Think Dreamgirls, but with stand-up comics, a musical of stand-up comics, and instead of singers, they're stand-up comics. And so Star Search was in their first season, and they saw me in the show, and they said, "Hey, we want you to be on Star Search." I go, "What? As a singer?" They go, "No, as a stand-up." I go, "I'm not really a stand-up. It's a part that I'm playing in the show." They go, "Well, you can win $100,000." I'm like, "I'll do it." Sure, I go, "If you see my act, I'm working on it tomorrow." So I got myself in the club, and I started working up some material, and I got on the show, I kept winning. Each week I would do, I had to come up with, every time I won, I had to come up with another 2.5 minutes. So I was pulling all the stuff out of my street act, and I was putting stuff out of the comedy group that I used to work with back in college, and I used to do stuff like The Wizard of Oz in 2.5 minutes. I'd be like, "As mayor of the Munchkin City in the county of the land of Oz, we welcome you most regally, but we got to verify it legally. We represent the lollipop you, the lollipop you, the lollipop you, and in the name of Oreo, yo, Oreo, yo. What's them? That's the castle of the Wicked Witch. Oh, Dorothy's in that awful place. Oh, I hate to think of her in there. Fellas, we've got to get her out. I got a plan to get in there, and you're gonna lead us. All right, I'm going there for Dorothy. Wicked Witch or no Wicked Witch. Guys or no guys is just one thing I want you fellas to do. What's that? Talk me out of it. Anyway, I do stuff like that. But I wound up beating Rosie O'Donnell in the semifinals. I don't know, can you hear me without this thing? I hate that ringing.
I was going to ask, why did you switch with me?
Because the phone, because it was ringing.
Oh.
And I thought maybe that one wouldn't.
It's haunted.
Testing. Hello.
Oh, who?
So, yeah, and then I went on into the finals, and I beat Sinbad in the finals. And the next thing I win $100,000. They're going, "You're going to open for Tom Jones in Vegas." I go, "I got no freaking act. I'm going to open for Tom Jones in Vegas." So I got myself into the club again, and I made sure to nail down a good 20-minute act with some of the stuff that I had been winning with on Star Search and that kind of thing. And I wound up opening for all these big acts, the Temptations and the Four Tops on their TNT tour, and I opened for Lou Rawls for 5,000 people at Michigan State. I opened for like I said, the Temptations and the Four Tops at Westbury Music Fair. There was like 5,000 people. So I quickly was like thrust into this world from becoming a theater actor, being a stand-up comic, And of course, everybody in LA knew I was the guy that won Star Search. So they wanted me for their sitcoms. And the first series that I got was for HBO. And it was HBO's first series. It was called First and 10. And for some of you don't remember, it was about football team. O.J. Simpson was the general manager. Yes, I worked for O.J. Simpson with O.J. Simpson for 6 years. Delta Burke, who we all know went on to do Designing Women and all these great shows, was the owner of the team. And Chris Maloney from SVU was a quarterback. I mean, all these people were, had started their careers on this show. And of course, they had all my big football heroes as well, some amazing football heroes. And I played the kicker. His name was Zagreb Shkedusky, and he could kick. Score! I kick! I played for the California Bulls. Both, yes? Editing for the kids today, so. It literally, Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down getting me on Star Search launched me from street performing to being pretty much a household name. I mean, I was walking down the street and living in New York at the time, and people would come out to me every day, wherever I go. And I don't know if I was, maybe I started leaning more towards the voiceover stuff because I wasn't so comfortable with being recognized everywhere, or whether it's just the ability to play so many different characters. I quickly found out that when you're, an actor, they mostly hire you for what you look like and who you really are. You don't get to play, until you become like a famous character actor, you don't really get to play so many things that aren't you. And I so loved doing that. Once I was on First and 10 and they were going to do Tales from the Crypt, they knew that I did all these voices and characters and asked me to come audition for Tales from the Crypt. And I was like, oh my God, I collected those comic books. I can't believe they're making it into a series. And I went down to Kevin Yeager's studio, and he was creating this puppet, and he was, making him out of, he didn't have a big budget, so he was making it out of spare parts out of his studio, including, some people don't realize this, but he used Chucky eyes as the eyes for the Crypt Keeper, which was really cool, He loved it, he wound up using them. So, I could just see what he looked like, and Kevin Yeager just had like a boombox with a microphone that I could, do my recording into. And when I started doing this voice for him, he was like, yeah. I'm doing it for him, and I'm laughing, and he's laughing, and I realized, the Crypt Keeper's laughing at his own jokes and at his own puns, and that kind of stuck with me, and I kept that. And the next day he had me doing it for the two biggest, movie producers in Hollywood. Joel Silver and Dick Donner in their office, and they're like, that's great, kid, you're hired. We'll see you on the set. They walked out of the room, and I was like, okay, what just happened? Did I get the part? Kevin's like, yeah, they just gave you the part. I couldn't believe it, it happened that quickly. That was 1988. We started shooting in 88, and the show came on the air in 89. Wound up, 7 seasons on HBO, which was pretty much a new network. I had done some other stuff for them. I worked on Dream On as well as First and 10 and some other stuff, and did some comedy specials and stuff. But here it was. Nobody knew that this show would be so mainstream popular. Everybody thought it was something that just kids that were into it like me were going to love, and nobody knew that kids were watching it. Everybody thought it was a show for adults. It had some pretty rough content, nudity and language and the whole thing. Meanwhile, a lot of you are proof that kids were watching it. So, now it has a bigger fan base that grew up with it than it had when it originally premiered, which is incredible to me. Like I said, I've been doing this for 38 years. I've done so many different projects, many of which, paid for, my health insurance and my pension and my house and all these things that you probably have never heard of. And here I have this thing that's been around, since 1989, Tales from the Crypt, and it's one of the things that I loved as a kid with the comic book and stuff, and here it's something that, I'm the best known for, so it's really kind of cool that it's come that full circle for me. It is amazing, and I'm really grateful for it. I'm grateful, obviously it was a well-made show. And I know you wanted to ask some questions about it, about the show and about its future and that kind of stuff. And,
Sure. Well, I mean, you said you were a big fan of comics.
Yeah.
So you would describe yourself as a horror aficionado?
I'm a specific horror aficionado. I mean, I loved the Universal horror monster movies as a kid. Loved the comic books because they were comic books. I love the stories. I love the artwork. I love the stories weren't that deep in the comic book. They're pretty extended within the the Tales from the Crypt, the way we wrote the scripts. But it was all fun. I definitely got the fact that there was humor in it. I mean, my favorite movie as a kid was Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. It had all the best Universal horror monsters in it. It had Abbott and Costello. It was funny. It was scary. I remember, these guys work in a warehouse and they find Frankenstein in a packing box. I was like, hey Mom, you can order a Frankenstein. I want one. I wound up getting like the 6-foot cutout of Frankenstein that sat in the corner of my room as a kid. And I would swear I'd wake up in the middle of the night just getting closer to my bed. I swear I was doing that, But, so I did love that. And then of course, when all the sci-fi stuff like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman and Mothra and all, there you go. And we got Mothra in the room, ladies and gentlemen. I was hooked. I was hooked on that stuff, so it was pretty incredible. It was pretty. I never, like Mask of the Red Death. I remember going to drive-in with my parents, and we got to watch the cartoons, and then we were supposed to go to sleep in the back of the station wagon while my parents watched whatever it was. And I'm like glued to Mask of the Red Death. This is a really screwed up movie about the Spanish Inquisition with Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe. This is not a talk back yet. You get to ask questions in a few questions, and then I'm going to be with you. But I love the pink hair.
Couple more minutes.
I love the pink hair. But here, we're doing Mask of the Red Death, and it's an incredible, movie to me. I just thought it was such a cool thing, and the way it just made the hair raise on your arms and stuff. So I at that point, I was hooked into horror. I was never a huge, although I loved. For kicks, going with my friends in high school to go see, Night of the Living Dead and these kind of things. They would do a double feature when Dawn of the Dead came out and that kind of thing. Of course, we were laughing more at the guy who was tripping on LSD in front of the screen the whole night. Oh wow, look. It's true. Slasher movies, I love them, but they weren't like what I loved most about horror. It's some of the things I really love about horror nowadays is they still use so much practical effects in making them. It's not all the CGI and all the stuff that it takes to make. So they do use some CGI, but if you notice, you'll go see a movie that was even 3, 4, 5 years old from now, and you'll go, wow, the effects look really cheesy compared to what they're doing now. They were showing footage of it. God bless Margot Kidder. I met her at a lot of these conventions, and she was an amazing lady. If any of you ever got the chance to meet her, she was pretty incredible. She was a troubled woman, but she had some health problems and stuff. But she was an amazing actress and a really sweet woman. But they were showing some footage from Superman of her and Christopher Reeve flying through the air. You could tell they were on a wire, in a black room, and her dress was flowing like this, which of course, if they were going as fast as they were supposed to be going, they would be ripping off her body, and stuff like this. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, the effects, but they held up at the time. But the practical effects that you go and see where they just, doing black and white with K-Rose syrup as blood and make an arm that falls off that's made out of rubber and stuff, and when they're using, I don't know what they were using for body parts in Night of the Living Dead when they had like entrails and stuff. I don't know if they were actual pig entrails or probably or something like that, but whatever the practical effects were still resonate and still will resonate if you did them yesterday or today or tomorrow, as opposed to these, these computer generated effects that just don't hold up. The other night when we were watching Demon Knight, was there anybody here that was at the screening the other night? That was pretty cool. It was a pretty fun time at the Amherst. We did it. We did a Q&A. Psychological horror? Yeah, I love psychological horror. You mean like Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist? Yeah, that's great stuff. That's some of my favorite. To me, that's the scariest horror stuff for sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. It's a good question. We're going to open the floor for sure, but that's a good question since we're right here. Probably still what was the scariest movie when I watched it, and I'm sure it probably still holds up, was The Exorcist. I just had not seen anything like that, and it was so visceral, but then it was so like, it attacked religion and your psyche and, you know, your belief in God and all these things. That's what, you know, I mean, and that was incredible. And what they put the actors through in order to bring that across to you would be easy today. It was not easy. If you've ever met Linda Blair and you've gone to one of her Q&As, the things that they put that poor woman through to be able to do the stuff that they did. She was a girl at the time, you know, was pretty incredible. So, but yeah, that kind, you know, The Omen and, you know, some of that stuff is really, really, really great. In terms of horror, that's the scariest stuff to me. Tales from the Crypt obviously is not the scariest stuff. It's meant to be fun. If any of you have the box set, go back and look at the season 1 behind the screens. You know, they talk about, you know, how Tales from the Crypt evolved from comic book to television to movies. Well, comic book to movies. They had that 70s movie with Ralph Richardson playing the Crypt Keeper, and then which was just like a 3-episode movie, and then to TV, back to movies. And they talk about how, you know, I mean, really the Crypt Keeper is your host. He's meant to you know, to do the, you know, it is tongue-in-cheek, which is, there's my guys. They came in from, hey, Hollywood. Hey. We saved you a seat over there. Anyway, this is my bouncers. No, really, there's my stalkers. Yeah, right. And so, but they, you know, the Crypt Keeper is meant to be that ride to the top of the roller coaster before they drop you, you know? It's like, you know, some movies and some episodes of Tales from the Crypt are not, you might find as fun as some of the other ones. Everybody has their favorites. I know some of the ones that people love the most are like, you know, All Through the House, the Christmas episode. I don't know what that's about, but people love mixing Christmas with horror. You know, naughty and nice. You know, it's just really, really, really great. And Bob Zemeckis obviously is a great director. And every single one of those, except the very last episode that was shot, which is the animated one of the 3 pigs, all the other ones were all based on EC Comics stories. You know, whether it be Tales from the Crypt, you know, Tales from the Vault, Two-Fisted Tales, or whatever the EC Comics that they licensed to do those with. So it was some pretty cool, you know, pretty cool stories that you could attack, but they're all fun. And the Crypt Keeper was meant to let you know that this was supposed to be fun. And I think that that's why we were surprised by the fact that kids were into it. I mean, I certainly would have been into it if I was walking by the TV set and I saw some creepy puppet cackling at me, or I heard that from the other room. I would definitely have to come see it. I'm sure it's what inspired my choices in what I did vocally, and their choices in what they made. I constantly was begging them to make a kids version, a live-action kids version. They were like, nah, too scary. Little did we know they were watching it anyway. I mean, they did the cartoon, they did the game show, we made things for kids. But ultimately, you know, the kids that loved it found it as, you know, the adult version. Luckily, you know, when it came on Fox after its original airing on HBO, you know, it was done on network television, so some people got to watch it with their kids because they cut out, you know, the racy content, even though it's still kind of, you know, you can find out pretty quickly if your kid is gonna, you know, either go, oh, that scares me, but I really like it, or, you know, I just turned into George Carlin there for a second, I don't know why, I really like it, or, you know, or if your kid's going to forever be scared of it, you know. But I constantly heard the stories. You know, my parents wouldn't let me watch it, so I watched it with my grandma on the weekends. You know, my parents knew I loved it, and they'd only let me watch it if I did my homework. You know, my parents knew I was afraid of it. They'd make me watch it if I didn't do my homework. You know, I mean, there's a lot of great stories, and I'd love to hear some, you know, as we go on. Why don't you ask a few questions, then we'll open the floor.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, we only have about 15-20 minutes left, so I was going to open up the floor to anyone. Step right up to the mic, ask away.
Great. Or if you have a great story about, you know, what Tales from the Crypt did to you. I said, just walk on up. You don't even need to raise your hand. Just stand in line, and whoever's. What's that?
I told you her story earlier.
You did. This young lady's father used to say the Crypt Keeper was her girlfriend, her boyfriend, and she believed it. Until this day. She can't go to sleep without the Crypt Keeper saying, "Have I got a bone for you?" Yes, dear.
Okay, first of all, huge fan. Second, of all the stories that you've done, which one had the twist that stuck with you the most? Like to
The Tales from the Crypt stories?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I love the episode with Tim Curry playing the mother, the father, and the daughter. You know, The Death of Some Salesman is the name of the episode, and it's just, it wouldn't have been as twisted with anybody else playing it, you know, or if they had hired different people to play the parts. But with the same actor successfully making you believe that those characters were the same family. And trust me, I was down on the set every day when he was shooting that because I had to see him do that. And my parents were in town, and my parents don't travel much. They're very old world. They live on the East Coast, but they had been in town, and they wanted to see something shot. So I took them down there, and Tim Curry was playing Winona, the daughter, that day. And so he was playing this, like, he had teeth implants, and they made hammer toes, you know, for him, and his shoes, and you know, and you know, we pulled off the wig. They were like, "Oh my God, that's that actor. What's his name?" I was like, they couldn't believe their eyes. They just couldn't believe it. And he was brilliant in it, and it has such a great twist. And Gil Adler, who directed that, wrote and directed that episode, had that vacuum cleaner with Ed Begley Jr., you know, it stuffed in him, or whatever you would call it, in his closet for years in his office. So it was The Man Who Was Death, which was not the first episode shot, but our first episode shown with William Sattler, was really, really an amazing episode because Walter Hill directed it, who's an amazing director, but he got Ry Cooder to come in and do the music, and it had that really cool kind of, you know, slide guitar music with him. That happened to me on a date once. Don't go there, and do not explain that to your kids. Anyway, I don't know where that came from. I lost my train of thought now. I'm a little jet lagged, so if I'm a little punch drunk, that's why.
All right, second question.
Okay, you get two.
I'm a huge Knight Rider fan, so when I saw that you worked on the Knight Rider, Team Knight Rider.
That's right, I played Plato.
Yeah, Plato. How was that experience?
It was a lot of fun. You know, it was offered to me. A buddy of mine was the producer. He was my best friend from college, and he happened to be the producer on it. And he had produced my kid show. A lot of people don't know this, but I had my own kid show on the USA Network. It was very twisted. It was called Johnny Time, and anytime you were on Johnny Time, you could go anywhere the kid's imagination could go. You could, like, you know, like the kid lost her braces, and they'd take her into the couch. You know, there'd be all these other characters, of course, played by me. You know, like a guy with all gum in his hair, and it was like my head with a puppet body, and his name was Small Change, and it was made up of crap from under the couch. You know, stuff like that. It was a really twisted, kind of psychedelic version of like a Pee Wee Playhouse meets, you know, I don't know, Mike Myers, I guess, I don't know. But it was well loved, but unfortunately, USA Network never really they played it, but they never really came through and building the children's network that they wanted to. So I was kind of like the lead into the WWF on Sunday mornings. And that's where they found out it was really popular with stoners. And since they don't sell a lot of products to stoners, it kind of got its run and that was it. But my buddy Gil, who was my producer on that as well, called me up and said, we need somebody who can do like all these TV voices and stuff, and you're going to be playing Play-Doh, who's a motorcycle that talks to, you know. And I was like, great, fun. And they just kind of cut me loose, so it was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for your questions. Next. Thank you. You can applaud. That's okay, we can hear you.
Well, big fan.
Thank you.
Crypt
What's your name, by the way?
Josh.
Josh, thank you.
Besides the Crypt Keeper, what is your favorite voiceover work?
Wow, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one because I do so many. Lately, I've been working a lot for Illumination. You know, they do all the Minion movies and Secret Life of Pets, stuff like that. We've been working on the Grinch movie. I didn't tell you that, or I have to kill you. So that, you know, like you go in and you do like 10 different fun voices, and there's other people doing them too, so you don't know who they're going to use because they just want to have variety when you come in and you do a bunch of stuff. So that's really a fun thing. Lately, I've been doing Pete Puma, who was one of my favorite characters in Warner Brothers as a kid. So now I get to revive him. He's like, I know you. Yeah. Hey, you want some sugar? Sure. How many lumps? Oh, 3 or 4. Bam, 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 bam. Definitely one of my favorites. Although I didn't create that voice, it was one of my favorites. Love playing Ray Rocket and Rocket Power. Rocket Power was one of my favorites for those of you who watch Rocket Power. A lot of people are always even shocked to find out that I did that voice. You know, it was fun doing stuff like, Jeff was going to ask me this question about what's the difference doing regular voiceover, and of course I do a lot of animals, like I did Miko the raccoon in Pocahontas, and thank you, Elliot in Pete's Dragon, in the new version of Pete's Dragon, and it's very different because you're trying to emote human emotions, bring them across, but with an animal sound. And although it was hard, it was fun. I remember auditioning for, and it's truly one of my favorite things I ever worked on, was Pocahontas doing Miko the raccoon. And I went to Disney. Hey, nobody walks out on me.
We'll be back.
We're going to be following you. Tracking you down. Miko was, you know, I went into audition, and you go over to Disney, and it's always kind of a scary thing. You go into Disney, because huge buildings and big producers, and you know, all these other great voice actors auditioning, and there's people that have worked really hard getting it to this point. They've probably already been working on it 2 years when you come into audition for a voice for something. And so I come in and they go, okay, John, you're going to be auditioning for Miko the raccoon. Are you ready to I go, well, I haven't seen a script. They go, there's no script. Just come in, you know. So I come in, and they have a room that's like 3 times this size, and it just has storyboard after storyboard of pictures of Miko everywhere on easels, you know, that the artists did of their different design ideas for the character. And because they're going to record you first and then animate to your voice, and then if they have added anything, you go back and add the little touches to what they've done.
Did you have to wear the suit with the little balls?
That's motion capture. I didn't have to, they weren't doing that yet, but I did that for Jack the Giant Slayer, which was pretty cool. I got to work with Bill Nye, you know, from Underworld. You know, everybody know Bill Nye, you know, from Almost Famous. Not Almost Famous, Love Actually. And amazing, and I got to work with Bill for 4 months, pretending that I was his other head, this 2-headed giant, which if you ever get a chance to see that movie, if you haven't seen it, it's really quite good. Bryan Singer directed that, Jack the Giant Slayer, but that was all motion capture, so we actually had to act the parts, not just voice them. But in Miko the Raccoon, they would actually videotape you in the room. But when they were auditioning me, they were like, okay, so Miko runs through a log, he comes out the end of the log, he's over the water. He realizes that he's falling towards the water, he's like, okay, I might as well, you know, turn it to a dive. So you turn it to a dive, but then halfway down he's like, no, this is scary. He's fighting through the air. He goes into the water, he bounces his head back up, spits out water, and shakes it off. Go. So I was like, okay. You know, and I'm doing this thing for them. And they're like, oh my God, you do like a real raccoon. I go, yeah, I live in this wooded area, and they like run across my roof like a SWAT team some nights. You know, and I'm like, this is what they sound like when they're screeching. This is what they sound like when they're screwing. You know, I'm doing all this stuff for them, and I don't know if I'm going over the line. You know, I don't hear from them for like 6 months. You know, and I thought I didn't get the job, but really they just weren't ready to go. And then my agents go, oh, you know, you're going to start recording Miko next week. I was like, I got it? Nobody told me. You know, I couldn't believe it. But truly an amazing experience, really wonderful experience, and a beautiful movie. You know, when you get a chance to be on something like that, it's not easy to bring across those types of things without words that they've written, or you know, the ability to actually speak words. It's not easy to do, but you know, once you get good at it, they hire you for that kind of thing. So I'm very lucky. Good question. Thank you. Next.
Hey, how's it going again?
How are you?
So how did you get your career like going and stuff like that? How did you go about it?
You know, it's not. If you guys had come here on time. Everybody else heard the story. Let's turn it back. I was like, anyway, that's what happened before you guys. That's what happened before you guys came. Anyway. You're welcome. I started, as I told everybody, I started, in the theater, and found out quickly I couldn't make much money at that. And through street performing, and then eventually doing some stand-up and getting in a show about stand-ups, I won Star Search as a stand-up comic. And that pretty much is really what launched my career. But before that, I really struggled for a good 5-6 years in New York, doing whatever I could do. But I really wanted to make my living as an actor. I didn't want to do any other kind of work. I took a few jobs here and there, painting apartments for a friend, or working at a kid's clothing store for a friend when the weather wasn't good and I couldn't street perform. But other than that, I wanted all my work to be performance related, and eventually, because I was like, there's nothing else I can do. I wasn't a very good student as a kid. I was dyslexic, and they didn't know what that was as a kid. When I was a kid, it just said I was lazy and disruptive. But of course I was. I wasn't lazy. I was just disruptive because I wanted to be included and somehow show what I could do well. And so I developed the things that I loved the most to do well, and I made sure to be confident in doing those. And when I started doing stand-up eventually, I would go out at, before it was light out, I'd stand in line outside the club to get on the list to sign up, so that night I could be on the list to perform. And I'd already been polished enough through working with sketch comedy and stuff that they were like, they asked me back the very next night and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's dreaming it, going after that dream, even at the cost of not getting it. That's what I tell people. It's like, you don't know if you're going to get your dream, but if you're not going to take the risk to go after it, you'll never know.
Okay, that's cool.
May all your screams come true. Yes.
So,
What's your name?
Connor?
Nice to meet you, Connor.
So I didn't see Crypt Keeper yet, but were you the person that had the puppet while talking?
The puppet was actually worked by 5 different guys. It took 3 guys just to make their face work. You've seen Chucky, right? Have you seen Chucky?
Yeah.
The same guy that made Chucky also made the Crypt Keeper. So inside the Crypt Keeper's face is all these little servos, the little motors they use for those little remote control planes. And he worked out all this stuff where there was one guy that he had on a headgear when he moved his mouth. It moved the mouth of the Crypt Keeper, but he also had to move his lips separately with his fingers with his little toggle switches, you know. And then there was another guy that moved just this part of his face and the tongue. And another guy that worked the forehead and the eyes, and they were all on little remote controls with wires that hooked up into the back, you know, up the butt of the Crypt Keeper into his head. And then there was another guy working his head in one hand, and then another guy working the other hand. And they're all wearing black behind the chair and all that stuff. It's an old style of Japanese puppetry called buraku. And if you ever see that, look it up online, you can see it. The guys wear black shrouds and the puppets are about this big, and they move the puppets around the stage, and after a while you don't even see the people behind them, they're all wearing black shrouds. So, and this style of puppetry is ancient, and puppetry that you've seen, you know, like even Jurassic Park when they do close-ups on those dinosaurs and stuff, rather than do CGI and want to make them look really real, those are like puppets that somebody's working from off stage, you know. And so I would go in the studio and record my stuff, you know, my voice, and they would just like Miko, they would record me and how I moved, and so then they could do it as playback, and the puppeteers could choreograph all their stuff to my playback, to my voice. I didn't take him home. I do have a full-size Crypt Keeper at home. It's kind of like one they were selling at Spencer Gifts that they sent to me, you know. But it's the original one is very expensive and very delicate. They'd have to, after every show, they'd have to remove the rubber flesh because it's so thin that it just break down in a week and fall apart. They would have to change that out every show. They'd have to make, you know, new molds. I mean, they'd have to mold new ones and that whole thing. It was really quite an amazing artistic project. Tales from the Crypt was a very expensive show to do. Thank you very much. It was an amazing, you know, a very expensive show to produce. So we never, you know, everybody worked for whatever they could pay us to do it, you know. But we all knew that was a great show, and we stuck with it. And you know, later when they pimped out the Crypt Keeper for Bud Light and stuff, we made some money here and there, but you know, it wasn't a show that, you know, that anybody, I'm sure they lost money making the series originally, hoping they would make it back in ancillary rights, meaning, you know, selling the DVD and all that stuff. But you know, to this day, I mean, it's probably not back on the air so easily, A, because we're struggling to get the rights back from the EC Comics people. It's just a difficult thing to negotiate. And B, it's an expensive show, get somebody to produce it and say they're going to put up the money to do it right. Because nobody's going to want to see it done less than what they've already seen it. Do you know what I mean? And it's probably even more expensive today to do it than it was back then. Like, I know that they would probably want to do, you know, you're talking about doing the motion capture. They would probably, rather than do puppet, it would be cheaper for them to put the dots all over my face and do motion capture and have me play the Crypt Keeper, and he would be kind of animated, and he would probably look very much like the puppet, but he wouldn't be a puppet. You know, none of us we would probably prefer to see the puppet because that's the way we saw him move. That's the way we loved him come to life. But it's more expensive to do that way. But who would know how they would do it? We don't know until we're put in that position. So here's our last question.
Yeah, that'll be our last of the panel.
Oh, this one's kind of lame, I apologize.
No, nothing lame. No questions lame.
It's a story behind it, and it's a request.
Okay.
I was camping at a tent with some friends, and we were like half.
That's scary right there.
Yeah. And we were like, this is a long time ago, and we heard Tales from the Crypt in the background in the house, and
That's great.
We overheard we were half asleep, and we were just being slackers, and you know, like.
Come on, you were stoned, man. Admit it.
We were supposed to be mowing the lawn and stuff, and we were just wasting time and falling asleep on and off throughout the day, too much sugar or whatever. Okay, so we swore that we heard an episode where it said on tonight's Tales from the Crypt, a little girl dies. I know it sounds lame, but I was hoping I could hear it because we used to imitate it to ourselves all the time.
That's funny. I don't remember which episode that would be, and it sounds kind of morbid, but... Hello, kiddies. Tonight's episode is about a little girl who dies. Next, I'm staying busy. I still do theater in LA because I love it, and I've always loved doing theater. There's nothing like getting in front of an audience. I don't really do stand-up anymore. I haven't done it in years. If you're not going to continue to write and do your act and travel with it, it's probably not worth doing. But my wife and I are both theater actors. We love working on the stage. You don't get paid very much for it, but I love doing it. And of course, that's supported by the fact that I do, many different cartoons right now. Still working on the new Looney Tunes, doing Pete Puma, and like I said, I was working on the Grinch movie. This last year, I worked on War of the Planet of the Apes. I did a lot of ape vocals for the kind of stuff for the apes. I get a lot of that kind of work, so it's a lot of fun. A lot of interactive games coming up. We're not really supposed to talk. We signed in, non-disclosure agreements on those. So I can't really mention the names of them, but you'll know when they come out that I'm involved in them. I love doing these appearances. I don't get to do them that much because my schedule's heavy and traveling and that kind of thing. But I love doing it because I love getting up in front of people, and first of all, I love seeing some of the other horror people because I'm into it. And secondly, I love getting to meet you guys that, give back to me and support what I do. Because without you, I'm not entertaining nobody except myself, which is, sometimes can be fun. But, it's a really fun thing. But there's always stuff popping up on my IMDb page. You can see what's on there. I always post a lot of stuff on my Facebook page. Everything is under my name, John Kassir. I don't have any fancy like the original, but not to be confused with the Crypt Keeper, John Kassir, or any of those. It's just John Kassir, Kassir. JOHNKASSIR. So my Facebook page, I don't really use my Instagram page that much, but I'm going to start because I've been taking a lot of fun photos. One of the fun things that's happened recently is with the emergence of tattoos within the last 20 years, and with the love of the Crypt Keeper in the last 20 years, I get a lot of Crypt Keeper tattoos. So I've been collecting photos of people I'm trying to put together even a website or a tabletop book or something with all the photos of the Crypt Keeper tattooed on people. Because I love being under your skin.
Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon. But most of all, thank you, Mr. Kassir. Give it up for him, ladies and gentlemen.
If you need something back at the table, I think I have some photo ops scheduled before that, but some professional photo ops if anybody's interested in that. Otherwise, I'll be back at the table. And I'm not only there to sign autographs, which I love doing, of course, for all of you, but also I'm there to answer your questions or just to say hi and shake your hand. Thanks.
I love the episode of Joe Pesci.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Split personality.